Good evening, everybody. We have anybody on here with me tonight, or am I by myself?
No, good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm good, good, good. I see. We got some other folks connecting there, Zach. Well, I hope everybody's having a good week. So I'm gonna go ahead. I know I'm a minute early here, but that's unusual for me. But I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and we'll talk about where we are in terms of our weekly schedule and recognize our players of the week.
Not me.
Let's see. Let me pull up schedule. So we're already in week 7. Great day. Next week you have the week off. I want to remind everybody. Hey Kathleen, she just popped in. Next week you have the week off because of the holiday. Um, and then when you come back, we'll get to case study 3, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. So let's look at week 7. This week we're going to talk about discipline. And so your task was to interview an assistant principal or other school disciplinarian. And we're going to talk about discipline tonight. But if you want to see a good one in our discussion board, Paul's is really good. And his highlighted the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. So let me touch on that just a second. We want to have a working relationship with law enforcement in our building, especially if we have SRO, school resource officers. But now remember, we have different jobs. Police operate on the standard of probable cause. They can't just search kids at random. You can as a school administrator. You only have to have reasonable suspicion. So the standard to conduct a search or to question a kid is completely different from you than the police. But now, on the other hand, they have powers of subpoena. We've talked about that. They can they can subpoena phone records and those kinds of things and confiscate phones. Now, for your own protection, I would not search a kid without a resource officer present, because if you find something illegal, you can't just take it and put it in your desk because you're now in possession of something illegal. So always have a police officer there. You do the search. You know, have them turn out their pockets, empty their book bag, their locker, or whatever. And if it's an illegal item, a knife, a gun, drugs, or whatever, you make sure that the policeman takes it into custody and he can take over from there, or she can take over from there. But the notion of discipline, it takes a lot of time. We want to try to do restorative practices. We got to make sure that we know what the substance of due process is. That's substantive due process, and then make so that we can follow that procedure to make sure that we don't, if we get sued, we don't lose. Understanding that you can, anybody can appeal your decision. The assistant principal's decision can be appealed to the principal to the area superintendent, the area superintendent to the superintendent to the board, and then court. I mean, there's 6 levels of appeal that civil court that you go through. So you got to be clean. One of the things that came up in last night's class, about I've written in the response, the automatic response that I give y'all is make sure you follow due process, get witness statements. What came up last night in class was teacher referrals. The teacher referral, the written referral, starts the entire evidence chain of a disciplinary incident. Please work with your teachers on writing disciplinary referrals. In that, don't put stuff like he's just as dumb as his daddy was when I taught him, or his brother was awful as well, or he's always this, or she's never that. Just the facts, ma'am. Just like the old Dragnet TV series, we just want the facts on that because that's a legal document. Leave the editorializing and things that somebody told you. You got to teach your teachers how to make sure that they start the whole chain of due process the correct way with an appropriate referral. That's a biggie on kids writing statements. They write their statements. Get written witness statements from kids, but make sure teacher referrals don't have bad stuff on or inappropriate things or illegal things. Now, Here's a point of law, a couple of points on sexual stuff. The only thing that you can show previous incident on or pattern is sexual things. So I asked last night, a kid walks out of class, it's the third time. You can't jump tiers with them. Still, you start at the lower end of tier one, which maybe is a parent conference, and then you can work your way up to day of in-school suspension, but you can't just jump to tier two on just a general class disruption. We have tiers in the handbook, and I'm going to show you that again tonight. But one of the things that teachers don't understand is this kid's a chronic problem. Well, we put in chronic misbehavior, the number 9, in Charlotte Mecklenburg. But what that does is give the kids the same rights as EC, because basically you're looking to put a behavior intervention plan. So it's just like when you refer a regular ed kid for intervention, they have the protection of exceptional children. The same way, if you do that, if you use a number 9, chronic disruptive behavior, you can do more consequences, but you've also got to do a functional behavior assessment, manifestation termination, DEC 5. You got to get Kathleen involved as a psychologist, all of that stuff. You basically are putting them in the intervention cycle if you do that. Now, you can do more punishment if it's not a manifestation of if you find they don't have a disability or it's a manifestation, but there's paperwork. But you can't be jumping levels. You can't put 3 tardies together and make a suspension, or you can't put 3 chronic level 1s together. That doesn't make a level 3. The only time that you can use previous behavior is on sexual things. Dr. Griffin Jordan is with the Tuesday night group. Last night she said Durham has finally caught up to the changes that we talked about in Title IX law, and they are now banning school administrators from doing any sort of investigation or queries into anything sexual because of that. Remember a couple of weeks ago, it's in under our weekly session, the updates to Title IX that says now you got to have an outside person investigate. That's now the law. You are not qualified, nor is it now legal for school administrators to conduct sexual investigations. So you got to remember that. But that's the only time that you could look at a pattern of behavior is in terms of sexual instance. Other than that, every instance stands on its own. So you start at the bottom of a tier or a level, and you work your way to the top. But again, work with your teachers on writing referrals so that they'll stand up in court, understand what the role of your resource officer in discipline versus your role. And each of you have limits to your powers, but you have different ones. Make sure that you're following your code of conduct, and I'm going to trace how that works just in a few minutes. And your behavior matrix in your school, make sure you're staying within those parameters. Because again, that's the substance is that matrix. The procedure is, did you do like we did Bobby in that case study where the most he could get was 1 day out of school suspension, and the teacher wants to fail him for the year. That's an absence of procedural due process. So make sure you know that. Tara's number 5 as well was very thorough. You might want to read Tara's. It was very good. When we get to 6 on discussion board 6 on the field trip, Shanika did a very good job with that one. And then on our evidence work, just a word, again, we're in week 7, pick up the pace. Christian is kind of out in front on that one, but everybody's on pace, but don't get caught behind here. So don't take the whole week off next week. Make sure you work on your evidence work. So that kind of catches us up to where we are. Again, no class next week. When you come back, you do your case study. So let's talk about your case study. The first case study, the teacher was at fault, and it was malpractice, malfeasance. She intentionally tried to harm Bobby. The second case, the superintendent was in the wrong, but his was misfeasance. He broke the law unknowingly. He was trying to do the right thing. This third case study that we've got coming up violates all 3 negligence standards: misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. You need to know that. The misfeasance, the nonfeasance started the whole thing under the function or the idea of antecedent behaviors. They didn't control the public displays of affection between Bobby and between the 2 kids, and it got out of control. That was a case of nonfeasance. They had a duty to act to stop the inappropriate displays of affection and didn't. And then the misfeasance part was, um, she talked to parents when she shouldn't have about somebody else's kids. She didn't intentionally do, but she did the wrong thing there. And then the malfeasance is when she told them, wait 2 months to be gay, till after, and then wait, could you wait till the school's out to be gay? No, that's against the law, and banning them from the prom is against the law. So that's she intentionally. And then what she did was a bail threat when she said, these people are going to harm you if you come. Well, you punish them, the people that are threatening the harm, not the victims. That's called heckler's veto. Make sure you understand the loudest shouting everybody else down and getting their way, and punishing the victim because of the threat from the idiot. Um, but the overarching thought of this case study, it's not really about LGBTQ. It's about any federal protected class of students, whether it be EC, 504, CTE, Title I, anybody that has a federally protected status. This case is about them. This just happened to be two gay kids. That's just the content of this one. But you have to understand that when you're dealing with federal programs and federally designated kids, they have protected status, and you have to make sure that you understand that and uphold that status. So this could be any protected class of kid. But please remember that the case study next time, that that you can clearly recognize the non-feasance, the misfeasance, and then the malfeasance that occurred in this case. And make sure that you look strongly at heckler's veto and look at the rights of kids. Look at, Tinker versus Des Moines in '69 that said kids get due process, that some disruption is normal. Look at your legal underpinnings of the cases y'all are learning to do. Now, we're going to get to the case in the end is going to touch everything. It's a case that hinges on non-feasance and then just goes crazy and touches pretty much everything we've done. The OMA, the skip, what you did last semester in terms of professional development, evaluating teachers, instructional programs. It's going to encompass all the four evidences and all the materials that we've covered since you started the program. That'll be our last case study. All right, I'm going to pause and catch my breath and look at the chat and see what's going on in there. Okay, we're good to go. All right. So I will close our weekly schedule and we'll move. What I want to do briefly is do a kind of a rationale, and there should be one on top of this one right here. So I want to develop a rationale for school discipline. It stems from the General Assembly, general statutes. The one in North Carolina, there are titles in South Carolina, so there's 70 of them, but in North Carolina, they're the general statutes. 115C, General Statute 115C has all the laws for elementary and secondary. From that's interpreted by the State Board of Education. They do a policy manual. From that, then it goes to the Department of Public Instruction, which is their central office, basically, and they do a disciplinary data reporting and procedures manual. And from there, it goes down to the school districts, and they develop a code of conduct. And then from there, it goes to the schools, and they develop a behavior matrix. So that is the legal rationale for school discipline. It starts with the General Assembly, goes to the state school board, goes to the Department of Public Instruction, goes to the local school board, goes to the local school, then to the local classroom. It goes in that order. And so there's a legal underpinning for everything we do in schools, a legal underpinning for everything. You have to understand where it starts. And so the beauty of that disciplinary data reporting manual, it references state law, the statutes, state board policy. It puts it all in one handy dandy place for you. Now, the one thing that the disciplinary data reporting manual from the Department of Public Instruction, and there's one just like this from the Department of Education in South Carolina, it does not tell you what consequences to give kids. That's the purview of the local school board in their code of conduct. It doesn't say if you cheat, this is what you get. It's up to the local to decide that. The state just says these things are against the law, must be reported. These things can't happen in our schools. You have to report them. And so what you do in terms of the punishment is up to your local board. And so you can have a level system or a tier system. But again, you can't jump tiers and levels. That violates due process. That's the one that teachers have the hardest time. This kid's done the same thing 4 times. Why can't we just take him out back and shoot him? Well, that would be capricious. That's too much punishment for for talking out in class. And no, we can't jump that up to a level 2 or 3 and suspend him because that's a level 1 infraction. That's due process as well. You have to understand that. But there is a legal rationale. Starts with the General Assembly, goes to the State Board of Education, goes to the Department of Public Instruction, goes to the local school board, goes to the local school, goes to the local classroom. Goes that order. Everybody has something to do. So I will show you those things now, and they're all in our shell, by the way, under week 7. So let me do that. So I'll first start out with. Let me change browsers here. Here we go. Here's 115C. It is all of the elementary and secondary education general statutes. There are 545 of them. As you know, you already intimately know 288, which is duties and responsibilities of the principal. But there are, look at how many there are. So this sets all the law behind public schools. This one's for North Carolina, same thing for South Carolina. So again, I've got a link to this one. This is it. And of course, we already know the one that we're most interested in this semester is 288, duties and responsibilities. So we're making sure we touch on each part of that. And so tonight we're doing discipline. Again, this is kind of our roadmap for this legal course because it addresses the legal part. I should have 288. Here we go. We're getting close. There it is. Duties and powers of the principal, right there. And so, grade and class 5, we had a case study on that one. Make accurate reports. How many times have you heard me tell you? You got to report this. Make reports to law enforcement. Improve instruction. That's what you did last semester. Conduct fire drills and inspect for hazards. That's why we went over that. That was why one of your activities to do that facilities inventory. The discipline schools. That's what tonight's module is about. This one right here, right there. Protect school property. That's why we do the facilities inventory, report certain acts to law enforcement and the superintendent. That's why I've told you when there's a violation of the law has occurred, call the law. Don't call the superintendent because it says clearly to call the law first and then the superintendent. Now, if it's just a behavior issue, you call the superintendent. But if it's one of these things right here, one of these acts of crime and violence, what does it say right here? Who you got to call first? Law enforcement. And then you call the superintendent. And I told you when I was that person, and they'd call me, I'd say, "Have you called the law?" And they'd say, "No, hang up, don't call me." I'm not going to be part of a cover up or be accused of that. The law is very clear. If any of these things right here, if any of these 16 acts of crime and violence occur, you got to call the law first. Make available school budgets. That's why we've worked so hard on budgets and improvement plans. That's what we've been working on the last 2 semesters. Evaluate life. You did personnel last semester. We did a personnel section this semester again on evaluating teachers. Did we not? Improvement plans. That's what that professional growth plan was that y'all did last semester. And then transfer records and sign driver's ed stuff. But you notice we've covered, by the time we get through this course, we will have covered everything that the law says the principal is responsible to do. So we didn't just go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or cover stuff that Dale thought would be fun. We have a legal rationale for why we do what we do. So here's all the laws, this being one of the laws. So that's how we start, is with the law. And then from there, we go to the State Board of Education policy manual. They've got a policy on everything in the world, and they have all these policies, but it doesn't say anything about do this, don't do that. So here's the policy from the state board. That's the next level down. And then that policy is interpreted by on discipline is interpreted by the Department of Public Instruction. They've got policy manuals on everything, this being one. This is what we're going to cover. The heart of what we're going to cover tonight is disciplinary data reporting. And it tells you how to do discipline and how to report it. It doesn't just tell you what to report it. It tells you how, gives you scenarios, tells you why you have to do it. All of those things are involved in this. So it's really good. And then from there, again, they outline you can't have these things in our school. Let me show you that. So here's what the state says can't happen in our schools, right here. All these things. And again, they're categorized by seriousness. If it says PD, that's going to count against that persistently dangerous from No Child Left Behind. It could cause you to lose your job if you got too many of those persistently dangerous, those acts of crime and violence. That's why we talked about antecedent behaviors. Stop the little things before they become the big thing. And then the RO is reportable offense. These all go in power school. And then UBs are just unacceptable behavior. These are the things that can't happen in your building according to the state because they're the one that pays they pay the freight. They pay the teachers. So you can't do these things. You'll notice there's no consequence tied to those. That's not their role. That then becomes the code of conduct in your district. Now notice who wrote this book? The Board of Education. Now, the central office really did, but the Board of Education is the one that develops and adopts the code of conduct, which has the levels or the tiers. We've already seen this before. We looked at Durham's last night. There's his levels. And so here's our tiers right here. We start with tier one, all the things that you can do. And again, you can't jump between tiers. And then here's the things you can't do. And it tells you exactly what the response will be. And so that's at the district level. And then that goes one more level down. And this is in this drive. It says Dr. Caton and Dr. Maraglia's folder is your matrix for your classroom. So it starts at the state legislature, goes to the State Board of Education, then goes to the Department of Public Instruction, then goes to your local school board, then comes to your school in terms of the code of conduct, and then goes all the way down to the classroom matrix. That is how the process of discipline works. Nobody makes it up. Nobody just decides off the top of their head. That's how due process works on discipline. It has to have a legal basis all the way through. Now, this document here, in terms of discipline, this is the most important document that you will have. If I were you, the first thing that I would do is I would print this thing out, the latest version, and put it in a notebook, and I'd have that thing on my desk, and I would refer to it often. Now, it starts out, again, it's from the public, again, it's interpretation of both state law, you'll see references to state law and State Board of Education policies. It is the interpretation, it's the how-to. The law or the policy says do this. This is how you do that. I mean, that's pretty good. They give you, they tell you, they even have scenarios in here of how to do it. And here's your State Board of Education. So again, they're the owner of this one. And it tells you all about the things that I've just told you, basically about that discipline is organized around incidents, not outcomes. And now what that means is the state does not tell you what the outcome or the discipline, the consequence has to be. So I've had principals say, well, I didn't have to report that because I didn't suspend that kid. That's got nothing to do with it. So under that, if you shot me and left town and didn't get caught, would I not be dead? The state says report what happened, not as a result of what happened, the consequence. You have to report the action, and that's what it tells you, and the principal is responsible. And right here again, under North Carolina general statute, again, it quotes all the laws, the statutes, the policies right down the line. Here are the acts of violence that count against your persistently dangerous. They got it right up front. Hey, you need to know. And even when you put one into power school, it has a prefix that says PD. That's going to count against your persistently dangerous total. You get 1 for every 200 or 5 for every 1,000 kids. If you have more than that, it's not going to go well for you if that happens 2 years in a row. You're going to go on a watch list the first year. Second year, you're going to go home. That's all tied to federal legislation, No Child Left Behind from 1991, that said 2 things. Kids don't have to go to persistently dangerous schools or low-performing academic schools. This is the persistently dangerous part. These are the ones that count against you. And And you have to report them, and you have to report them to law enforcement immediately. They'll come out and investigate because these are all crimes, as you can see. And again, a higher rate of these dangerous acts committed over a 2-year period may lead to school being designated persistently dangerous. And again, a ratio of 5 for 1,000 students. And don't be that dumb principal that said, I don't have to worry about this because we don't have 1,000 students. No, it's a 0.5%. It's 5 for it's 1 for every 200 or 5 for every 1,000. So that's the calculation. It's point is 0.5. That's a 0.5%. If you exceed that, you don't have to do it. Now, the general statute 115C12 requires state board to compile all annual reports. Now, if you don't put all your disciplinary data in 24 or 48, 24 hours for just regular unacceptable behavior, UB, or 24 on reportable or persistently dangerous, you have not followed that law. But now there's an extra layer since 2014. Now in 2014, it says so right there. It's now a federal requirement that you report as well. Now, it's not, again, there is no major, there is no minor. And before you ask me, do we have to put the minors? There is no major, there is no minor. Everything that's on that list that you saw a minute ago has to be reported. Well, all I did was conference the kid. Doesn't matter. You still have to report it. Now, I'm going to stop my share for just a second. How many of you know if your district uses a third-party vendor software like Educator's Notebook to put discipline in, and then it's uploaded into PowerSchool? Some districts do that. The thing to remember is you're responsible for what ultimately goes in PowerSchool. Oh, yeah. I think they use 360. Now, there's a provision in this handbook that says that you can use approved third-party software like Educator's Handbook or 360. You can do that, but you're still responsible to make sure that it's correct in PowerSchool. And there's a little bit, and one of the things that Dr. Griffin Jordan pointed out last night, the problem with Educator's Handbook going into PowerSchool is the calendars don't sync. And you don't have the right days for suspension. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And sometimes they don't translate exactly right. You're responsible. So even though you might use that as a shortcut and an easy way, in the end, it's got to be right. At the end of the year, you have to, Dr. Griffin Jordan showed us last night, she has to verify, and it's in this manual. You have to verify at the end of the year that all this is true and correct. And that third-party software, and there's even a passage in here that says, if you use it at your own risk. If it's wrong, you can't blame the software. Dr. Griffin Jordan last night was talking about, we're trying to get kids to come back to school. And they're staying out of school, and they're doing this and they're doing that. And again, that's about money. And so it's very important. So you say, well, Dale, what's that got to do with this one? That calendar sync issue. You must, in a legal sense, show the appropriate days that the kid was out of school, because you don't get paid for those days. And one of the things that, if the calendars don't sync, a lot of times, like a 3-day suspension will only show up when it gets transferred to PowerSchool as 2, and you're getting paid for a day that kids didn't come to school. That's a no-no. And so you got to make sure that if you use a third-party vendor software, that you understand that you're still responsible to get all that stuff in there the right way. And so, and it's not only a state law that you do this, as you can see, since 2014, it is a federal law that you report all the incidents that happen at your school. Even if all you did was conference the kid, we don't report consequences or outcomes. We report incidents. So you got to make sure you put them in there. Again, if you break federal law and do a zero tolerance like they tried to do Bobby in our first case study, you have to report that on yourself. Right here, it says that you have to report that. Again, that's going to go to the Office of Civil Rights because it's a federal crime to do that. You say, well, Dale, who's going to make, well, again, you get caught not doing it, You may lose your liberty and your house. It's right here. The federal government says if you do that, it's illegal, and you must tell us because we're going to sanction you if you do that. So right here again, the Office of Civil Rights, right here, Civil Rights Data Collection says you're not supposed to do it. If you do, you have to tell us. What has to be reported, all this stuff, look, everything, any incident that occurs right here has to be reported. What must be reported to law enforcement, here are all the things that have to be reported to them. That's one of those, if one of these happens, it says to make reports to law enforcement and the superintendent. This is the first call law enforcement. Some of the other stuff that would happen, like the deal with Bobby, since it wasn't a violent crime, that call went to the superintendent because certain things had to be reported to the superintendent. But this is one of those, if any of these happen, the first call is law enforcement. Got to know the difference. The procedure, again, and it'll speak to third-party vendors, and it tells you editing. You can edit incidents, using reports to check. You can run reports to check. You can run reports and you can look at how you're doing in terms of your ethnicity. You can run them by location. You can run a lot of different reports that can inform your supervision or how you handle discipline at your school. It has a bunch of scenarios here, reporting behaviors committed by offender. PD or RO feet should not be entered into Power School without authorization of the principal or the designee. Right there. You know, if you're the AP, you better make sure the principal knows that you're putting one of those PDs or ROs in and that you've already called the police. And it tells you that you have to do that. And then it gives you different scenarios here for multiple behaviors, report separate on this versus that. It has a lot of that, gives you a lot of examples to make sure reporting assaults, how that's done, make sure you get that right, reporting bullying, how to make sure that you get that done correctly. It's a how-to manual on how to report inside of Power School, which is a legal requirement that you have to do. And it gives you all the different things and how you do that. If you illegally use seclusion or restraint, you have to report that as well. These are against the law. Although they're not disciplinary incidents, again, the federal government says you have to report them just like you do zero tolerance. So if a teacher takes a kid to the radiator, that's a illegal use of restraint. You have to report that. The kid's the victim, the teacher's the perpetrator. You have to report the actions that you gave them. Again, the state doesn't tell you what you have to do, but your local code of conduct does say what you have to do to that kid. You have to tell it because this is going to become a part of that official record when that kid appeals or has to go to court or is up for exclusion. There's an automatic appeal on an exclusionary offense where he's going to be out for a long-term suspension more than 10 days. He gets an automatic appeal, and all your paperwork has to be there. And the punishment better fit the crime. You better not put in a tier 1 offense and you're asking for more than a 10-day suspension. That the two don't match. And I've had that to happen more times than I would like to recall. Basically, what they would do is they'd put a kid up for a pretty severe infraction. When nobody's looking, they'd go back into Power School and change it to something much less. Not understanding that when you ask for more than a 10-day suspension on a kid, they get an automatic appeal all the way up to the school board, and all this documentation has to occur. So we had a kid at Garinger who violently assaulted and injured a staff member. They put him out of school for 10 days and asked for an exclusion for a year. And during his appeal, went back to pull it out of Power School, and it wasn't there. The principal had gone in and changed it to a simple assault because she didn't want to get caught on persistently dangerous. Well, she used to be the principal. That's absolutely true story. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. You can't have second thoughts or, oh, that's going to be bad on me, or get cold feet, or your adrenaline calms down and you get the blood up out of the hallway. Well, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. You start having second thoughts on these things. The problem is parents and kids can go to the magistrate and file charges, and there's always going to be video around. And boy, I tell you what, when your own video hangs you, it does not go well for you. When you first said it was a an assault, and then you figured it was just aggressive behavior, and then the video shows a terrible assault occurring. I had one of those happen too. Well, I've had more than one of those, but I was thinking, and we had the kid captured on video. Oh, it was terrible. Put the kid in a coma for 2 weeks, and they went back and recategorized it as a simple assault. Yeah, and again, at graduation, you'll get to see how big I am. I was a small man next to this fellow. 6'8", 400, over 400 pounds. He hit a kid that weighed 135 pounds. He fractured his skull, and they put it in as a simple assault. Not good. I had a principal put in, I had a teacher at one of the public separate schools, the disciplinary school at Morgan. They were trying to get a kid into one of the locked rooms, the padded rooms, and got his arm caught in the door and just about pulled his arm off, had to have multiple surgeries, reported it as just a simple assault rather than assault with injury. And the problem is when he went to file his workman's comp that was denied, they said, you should be at work. What are you talking about? Doctor bills for surgeries. This was just, simple assault, no injury. And the man nearly had his arm tore off. And her response to me was, he'll eventually get most of the use of that arm back. I can't make that up. She used to be principal there. These are the kinds of things that, when you open your district up to lawsuits that you're going to lose because you were trying to hide your data and not report accurately what happened, we can't use you. We can't worry every day what you're going to do next. We have to be able to trust that you're going to do the right thing. And so you must report all this stuff accurately. Now, one of the things that at Vance, we had an AP that came through the alternative pathway. That's called TP3 now. It used to be called New Leaders for New Schools. And they would take people and let them carry a clipboard for a year as an intern, and then they would give them an AP job. Problem was they had no legal training, and she didn't know. When she went to the school, they said, get the number of out of school suspensions down. What they meant was get teachers out of their classrooms, make them go do their duty during the day, be on the hall duty, bus duty, cafeteria buddy. Make sure that they're there, make sure that they're supervising. Don't let kids mingle in the hall and the bathrooms. What she heard was get the suspensions down. So she stopped putting them into power school and just made her own, just made her a little, ran her off some copies and just started giving them handwritten, basically notes of suspension. You do not get to the official suspension form in power school till you get to the third or back screen. That is the only legal document that can put a kid out of school on an out of school suspension. And she was completely not even putting them in power school. State called me and said, is there something wrong with the equipment up at Vance? They haven't had a suspension all month. We had to revert, I don't know, $60,000 or $70,000 that they'd paid for kids that were suspended over 800 days of kids not in school that state had paid us for. She used to be AP at Vance. There's money tied to this stuff. There's federal law. There's state law. All these things. You can't get this part wrong. You can't let your ethical guard down and say, boy, if I report this, it's going to look bad for our school. Again, you can't be responsible for teachers' behaviors. You can't be responsible. You need to get out and supervise and work with these kids, but you can't take the weight for them. This will cause you to lose your house and maybe even your freedom. You got to let the chips fall where they may. You got to report things accurately and quickly, and you've got to call law enforcement and get them involved. Don't do sexual investigations. You're not qualified. And the police will throw you under the bus if you foul up their investigation, as they should. But again, the manual covers all this stuff, and we'll keep on through our manual here. Reporting the actions assigned, again, what you did to the offender, recording, report to law enforcement. It has all the things that you have to do there. Partial suspension days. And now this is, I want to stop again. Now, I don't want you to put it in the chat. I don't want you to raise your hand. I am as certain as I'm sitting down in this chair right here that there's somebody on this screen right now whose school uses either ABC or therapeutic suspension. both of which are against federal and state law. And I'll bet you there's somebody at this school who does it right now. I did it. Guilty. ABC is absence before conference. Kid gets into a dust up. He's just tearing the building up, and they call a parent. And they send the kid home, and they tell him, "You can't come back till your parent comes." That's illegal. That's that's a suspension, and you didn't record it. Or that's called ABC, absence before conference. That's against the law. Or therapeutic suspension, which is come get your kid, and you can just take him home the rest of the day. That's an out of school suspension. It must be recorded as such. There is no such thing as ABC or therapeutic. Oh, that's just a therapeutic. It wasn't a real suspension. Yes, it was. That's why you saw that. It said you have to, even if it's a partial, you still have to record it as a suspension, even if it's just part of a day. There is no such thing as therapeutic that doesn't go into task stream, into power school. There is no such thing as putting the kid out for an indeterminate length of time. You must tell them exactly how many days they get, and it must fit that code of conduct to the tier of what they did. You can't say, you didn't turn your homework in. You got to go stay. You got to go stay at home till your parent comes back. Well, number one, you can't be sending kids home for not doing their homework. That's be a tier one. And what if he stays home for 5 days? So I know that's happening. It's happened in time immemorial in schools. But I'm just telling you, if when you become a school administrator, don't get involved in that. It's just like comp time. Comp time is illegal. You cannot let people not come to work and pay them for the purpose of them coming and work at a later time, another time later. I know schools do that all the time. They call it Eagle time or Gopher time or Trojan time. Comp time is illegal, as is ABC and therapeutic suspension. It's all fun and games until you get caught, and then you're going to lose your job. All three of those will cause you to lose your job. Those are the three most common things that is common practice in schools that are completely illegal. No appeal. There's no mitigating factor. You cannot use comp time. You can't send a kid home on an indeterminate length of time, and you cannot send them home for a part of the day and not count that as a suspension and put it in policy. Period. That's not debate. There's not but if or some, there's no scenario that you can work up that I would say, yeah, it sounds okay. I'm just telling you now, don't do it. And the manual even tells you that is what I'm telling you. You have to report partial days right here, recording partial days. Entering the number of days for, again, you got to put the number. You can't do an ABC because you got to put a number of days in. It's illegal to send the kid home on an indeterminate time. Reporting incidents with victims. If you have certain victims of certain crimes, you have to offer them a transfer to another school. You have to enter descriptions. Again, so important to get that referral, because you should type that referral from the teacher directly into the official record in Power School. And so you don't want to say Jimmy's a dumbass just like his dad. That doesn't go well. And you do not get in the habit of editing their referrals for them either. You'll be accused of that. That will not go well for you. Expungement of student records after a certain period of time. Procedures reporting preschool disciplinary data. Federal regulations. North Carolina, again, starts with federal, comes down to state. We've seen how all that works. It's got guidance on all of these things. And here's that piece. And then we've got procedures for alternative learning placements. That's another thing we talked about at length last night. During COVID, we've been counting kids present if they were online or certain things. All that's going to return back to normal for next school year. If the kid's not in the building, he's not going to be present unless he's in a designated alternative learning placement, ALP. That's recognized by the state and has a separate school number. Now, all of you, your school has a number. I'm trying to remember what was my number at Olympic 410. One of my school numbers, one place was 333. But anyway, so unless unless the school that you work at has a school number, it's not designated as an alternative learning placement. That will not count for attendance. So these suspension centers that some districts work, where when a kid gets suspended from school, they can go over there and hang out during the day, that does not count. That will not count as attendance again next year. It counts on recovery, but it won't count for attendance. That's a local initiative. That's not an A. Now, if it's been designated an alternative learning program, the state recognizes it and gives it a school number, yeah, that would be attendance. But otherwise, it's not. So this notion that we won't count that kid out because he was over to suspension, no, he's still out. You can't count him as present. That's just a local initiative. Unless he's at a place that has a school number that's recognized by the state and he's not in your building, then he's absent. You cannot count him. All those rules are in this manual as well. Again, it's about money, folks. We got to make sure that we don't take money for kids who didn't show up. Alternative assignments for disciplinary reasons and ALP roster requirement. You have to enter their ALP student placement so that we know where they are and we can count them present. Has to be an ALP though. Has to have a school number. It can't just be one of those little suspension centers that you pay an in-school suspension teacher to go over there and hang out during the day. Again, it has to be a state school. It'll be a roster. There'll be a school number. And then you have to put in all this information, you know, where it happened, the type of offender that did it, reporting categories. Again, here are all the things that are infractions of the behavior code for North Carolina. If any of these things happen, you have to report it. Doesn't matter that you didn't do anything but tell the kid to quit it. It doesn't matter. It still happened, and you have to report it. Consequence types, you just have to say what you did. Again, there's nothing prescriptive. The local board comes up with the code of conduct that says if you're smoking, you get 3 days OSS. Well, then you have to put 3 days OSS. But now the state doesn't say that. That's your local board that sets the punishment policy. And here's all the things that you might do. So this notion that I don't have to report things unless I've suspended the kid, no. You see the different things here. I mean, even just simple as a conference to the kid. So this is not the determining factor of whether you have to put an incident in Power School. What the kid did, the incident itself. Even if you didn't punish him at all, you still have to put it in there. All these things, victim types, weapon types, the ALP enter, the reason why they were sent to the ALP. And again, it has to have a state code that it's a state school. And then here's the definition of your crimes, and they are graphic. I do not want to read them as an old school Baptist. And then guidelines for use of information with juvenile courts, differences in federal and state on reporting of seclusion and restraints. Again, they're illegal. You have to report them differently for federal and state. You have to follow this guidance. Again, OCR is pulled from Power School, so you have to get it right. That's the federal reporting. State reporting on all this different stuff, reporting physical restraints. And there you go. You have federal law and state law that says you have to report. Reporting is guided by the General Assembly, to the State Board of Education, to the Department of Public Instruction, to your local school board to develop the consequences and the code of conduct. And then your school has to have a behavior plan, and then classroom should have a behavior matrix. That's the way we do discipline down the line, just like that. You've got to follow all that stuff. But again, that disciplinary data reporting manual, the only thing, I mean, it has all your handy dandy stuff in it. The only thing it doesn't have is what consequence to assign. Again, you got to go back to your code of conduct for that. But again, we can't be jumping levels or tiers over the number of repetitions. We can just move within the same level. That's the biggest mistake due process that I see folks make. They just get fed up with the kid. This is the third time he's been tardy this week. We're going to send him home. Can't send a kid home for being tardy. That's a level 1 infraction. The most you could do would be in-school suspension. So Dr. Griffin Jordan said something last night. She's principal of one of the magnet high schools in Durham. She said, you need to sit down with your teachers and do what I just did with you for the last hour, 40, 50 minutes, so that they know what the rules are. Work with them on writing better referrals, more accurate things. Remember that you're just going to copy, you're just going to type these things directly in. You're required. When that written referral comes to you, they have a space in Power School. You have to type that statement out or copy and paste it in. Make sure that they've done that. That's the first step to due process, is that you've got an evidence chain. But also so that teachers know, well, Johnny's been out of my room 3 times. Why you send him home? Well, we can't send a kid home for coming late to your class. That's a tier 1 infraction. This is the limit. I know that teachers get their handbook at the beginning of the year, and parents and students get the parent handbook at the beginning of the year, but they don't read it, or if they do, they don't understand it. You've got to make sure that they understand that you're there to support them. You want to help them, but they can't be capricious. They can't expect draconian or drastic punishment over minor incidents. The code of conduct doesn't allow that. They've got to understand that you can't just send a kid home for the rest of the day and not count. You can't just send a kid over to the suspension center and him be counting. We don't get paid for him unless he's in an alternative school. But they've got to understand some of these things. They've got to understand that what they write on that referral is a legal document. Don't be writing crazy stuff on it, or stuff that you can't support, or inappropriate things, or especially derogatory things. He's always does this, or he's stupid and it's hereditary. His daddy was the same way. I told you the story when I was in Burke County. I had a teacher when I got there. She was in her 47th year teaching, and she taught not only a lot of the daddies, but the granddaddies as well. And she was a lovely lady. But I mean, out in rural areas, that's likely to happen. Everybody knows everybody. Uh, that's just like when I was out there. I had a parent call me when we moved to accountability in '91 when I was a principal. And the first thing we were required to do was stop doing tracking kids. We had to stop homogeneous grouping, where we had the bluebirds, robins, and buzzards. We had to do heterogeneous grouping, where we had all all levels in the same classroom. First thing that the parent called me, why is my kid in the dumb class? What are you talking about? Well, Jimmy's in there, and everybody knows he's an idiot. That kind of stuff. But you can't perpetuate that. You have to get teachers to understand. You might be at the end of your rope, just like the woman was with Bobby. He's deviled her all year long, but a lot of times where they'll take the run at the kid is when they write the referral. They'll write something a whole lot worse than what actually happened. And you get other witness statements. You get 9 other statements, and none of them look like hers or his. You have a problem. Or they editorialize. This is the 17th time he's done this, or it's hereditary. His brother was, or daddy was, or his mama was the same way. That kind of stuff. You have to understand that discipline has a legal basis, and it tracks an arc from federal to state, from the General Assembly to the state school board, to the Department of Public Instruction, to your local school board, to your local school, to the classroom. It tracks in an arc for due process. You have to make sure that it works in a hierarchy, comes down to the classroom or goes up to the federal government. Everything has a legal basis, and this is a wonderful manual to help you out with all questions that you have. The only thing that you would have to refer to your code of conduct for is what discipline you actually assign, and make sure again that it's not capricious, that you don't send a kid home for being tardy, because that would be capricious. The handbook doesn't allow that. Now, some districts have 2 code of conducts, and you got to pay attention to that. Some have an elementary and a secondary. If there was one in the news recently where a kid open hand hit his teacher because she took his Pokemon card. He's a 5-year-old. If a 15-year-old did it, that would be a different story. So make sure that you understand that use the sometimes they're in the same handbook. They'll have them initially in CMS when we split ours. We had, if you're in elementary or 6-8, and then we had high school. Eventually, most districts have gone to an elementary and a secondary code of conduct because the consequences obviously are much more for the older kids than the younger kids. So don't get caught in that trap of using the wrong book. And that's my closing story tonight. Always on our short weeks here, I try to say it in an hour. So my closing story is I went down to Providence High School to do this really serious hearing on a kid who brought 2 huge knives, just tactical knives, to school. And he came in, he was 18 years old, and he had his attorney. His parents didn't come. He had his attorney. And his attorney, if you remember the movie Revenge of the Nerds, the one they called Booger, it could have been his brother. He looked just like Booger. And he came in and he allowed the kid to testify. Now, I told him, I said, now, I swear him in. I'm an attorney, and so I'm my own counsel, but I'm there, as an impartial, you come, I'm the superintendent's representative. I'm the deputy, so I'm here to hear the story. But I'm going to advise you, everything you say can and will be used against you in court of law. This is going to court. And he let the kid testify, and I was like, I can't believe this, but hey, it's his attorney. And he was some kid, that was doing pro bono work and probably worked in some corporate, didn't know anything about school law. When he got done, he thought he was Clarence Darrow, and he pulled out the code of conduct and said, I want this case dismissed because this punishment is capricious. According to this handbook, the most you can do with this kid's a 5-day suspension. I said, you've got the elementary handbook. If you'll look around, you'll notice that this is Providence High School. He signed exactly what the handbook says. Well, then he wanted to exclude the kid's testimony. Well, it's too late, man. It's already in the court records, already taped. That kid was lucky to stay out of prison over having Booger as his attorney. So, but I've seen schools make the same mistake and give too much punishment because they were looking at the wrong handbook. So make sure does your district have one? Do they have like a section for elementary, middle, or high? Or do they separate it in 2? And even when they separate it in 2, a lot of times they'll do like 6, 8, and 9, 12 in the secondary. Make sure that you know that thing front and back, because that's, the state manual on reporting is going to help you on everything except determining what the consequence will be. You got to follow that code of conduct. And remember, you can't jump tiers or levels just over the number of times. In the end, the kid, just like we tried to put Bobby out of school for a whole year for turning in his brother's homework, and in the end, all he did was turn in his brother's homework. That's a bad look, and it loses in court every time because it's capricious. I know that was a quick review of the legal basis for due process and discipline. Achieved our goal of trying to get you out in an hour. Now, remember, next week we don't have class at all. And then the following week, again, it'll be marathon night, and we'll take probably either the second or third group that hadn't gone first. And by the time we get to, everybody will get to go first and get blistered by me before we get done. I think some of you got to skip that last week. I hate that too. But y'all are doing great on your case studies. They're getting better. Your reflections are very thoughtful. It seems like your teams are working better. I'm getting a lot of that. I'm very pleased. I told you, collaborating to develop a product is a whole lot more planning work, preparation, and a lot harder than just getting together and talking. And so y'all are progressing great. You're all on track on your evidence work, looks like. Again, Christian's kind of out in front on that, but everybody needs to pick it up. We should be moved to this week. By Sunday, we should be moved to skip task 1. And so if you're a little behind, it's okay. You got next week off to catch up. And you got your case study coming, but I couldn't be more pleased with your work. Anybody have any questions before we close out for the evening? Did I make the 7 o'clock day? Oh, look at me. I made the 7 o'clock day. Am I going to do a skip overview? I've already done one, but I can do another one. If y'all want to stay on, I'll do another skip overview if you want one. Everybody else, thank you for being with us. If you're already good, not, I'll go ahead and start the skip overview right now. Let me share my screen. All right. Let me tell you where you can go wrong on the skip quickly. So if we go to our skip materials, All right. What we're trying to do in the skip is we're trying to do a quick needs assessment, determine the gaps in communication between parents and the school. It's just that simple, folks. We're not looking for anything other than gaps in communication. We're not doing a needs assessment on academics or behavior. None of that. Gaps in communication. So North Carolina people, go to your teacher working conditions survey, go to the parent section and look. There's a few communication questions. South Carolina people, go to your parent survey. If you don't have it, get it from your principal. You should have already gotten it, and look at those communication questions. So let's look at that right quick. I'm just going to pull up the North Carolina one because I know I can get to it faster. So if we go to the North Carolina NC teacher working survey, you don't have to send out a survey of your own. You don't have to talk to anybody. You're going to need this for two things, for prompt one and prompt two of task one. So we're going to go to Allegheny County Schools. We will go to Sparta. Right here, community support and involvement. Parents and guardians are influential decision makers. That's one you want to look. This school maintains clear two-way communications. Teachers provide guardians with useful information. See, this is about gaps in communication. Parents and guardians know what's going on in this school. Support teachers, contribute to their success. Teachers contribute to the community. So look at that section. Whatever you see that's low, that's where your analysis come from in terms of the needs assessment on school, home / community communication. We're looking for gaps in communication. That's task one, prompt one. The second one is look at school leadership and see if there's any areas of concerns that you could make some recommendation to your school improvement team. So let's get that one right here. I don't see anything that's glaring on that one. There's a second section right here. Right here, mutual trust is not good. You need to do something about mutual trust. That would be the recommendation that I'd make to the school improvement team. So again, pretty simple stuff. This is we're not, we're not making bombs here. And so when we go back to our skip task and prompt, so let's look at task one, prompt one. The candidate will lead the skip team to conduct a needs assessment, determine the gaps in communication between internal and external. Again, just look at that community section of teacher working. That's it. All you got to do is report it. We got to have a background description and setting. You've already written that. Clear statement, purpose, and needs assessment. We're going to look for gaps. That should be one paragraph. List of participants, whoever's on your team. Analysis of the findings. You pop that, you put that up just like you've done before. You show that graphic from the teacher working condition survey. And here's our findings. And then a set of recommendations that says avenues of communication that will be established. And then a set of recommendations for both short and long-term objectives. All right, so here's where everybody kind of runs off the road. This set of recommendations, things we're going to do to address that. Your recommendations should be based in social media platforms. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. The whole notion here is we got to find a way to connect with these parents. We can have the best activities in the world at our school, but if they don't know anything about it, they're not coming. So the notion here is help us help you help your child. We want to get parents in our building for family math night, family reading night, family gifted night, family Title I night. We want all these wonderful things where we can help parents with their kids, but we don't communicate with them. They don't know about it. And so what we're doing with our recommendations and our short term is we're going to do a phone tree. We're going to create a web page. We're going to use FaceTime. We're going to use WhatsApp. We're going to use Instagram. How are we going to connect with these parents and so that they can do it on their phone like everybody does nowadays? So your methodology on your short term should be some way to connect with people. It's just that simple. Don't overthink it. Now your long term is now that we're connected with them, what kind of event are we going to? It's got to be an event. What are we going to do at our school? Family math night, family reading night, family EOG night. Family. What? How? We want something academic. Again, I've told you before. Just getting parents to come to your school for a ball game or talent show or step contest or something won't help you academically. We're looking for an indirect bounce in our achievement here by getting parents involved in their child's education. Help us help you help your child. Family math night, family reading night. Just that simple. And then prompt 2 is you look at the leadership, again, school leadership, and make any recommendations to the school improvement team about what might fix that. Then all you have to do after that is you start with the partial, the little short graphic organizer, and I'll show you that again in a minute. And you got to figure out the people that would be persons responsible or the human resources necessary to do the things that you've recommended in terms of your short and long term and how much money it's going to take. Now, I want to see people's names, not their positions. I want to see people's names because that's why it says persons responsible. Don't just put teachers. What teachers? I want to see names and I want to see dollar amounts. That's what fiscal means. Fiscal don't mean, well, yeah, it's going to take money. How much money? We don't know. If you don't know, what's the chance of you ever doing it if you don't know how much it's going to cost? That'd be none. If we don't have a person responsible for it, what's the possibility that's ever going to happen? None. Do I expect you to run this one? No, but I expect you to know how. That when you're a principal, if you don't have somebody's name as a responsible person, you don't know how much it's going to cost and have the money in hand, it ain't going to happen. And then in 3, you write the marketing plan, which is the full graphic organizer that we always use. And in 4, you write the 9 competencies that you didn't write when you did the OMA. It's just that fast. Let's look at the template. There should be a template under here. Skip example 1, 2, South Carolina, and the graphic organizer, which is our template as always. So, all right. This is the one you use with task 2 right here. Prompt, task 2, the short one. You use this one for the full marketing plan for task 3. Now, you can fill out the full one on task 2 if you want to. But this is all that's required. This one is for task 2. This one's for task 2. This one's for task 3. Pretty simple. Go straight back to your teacher working condition survey or your survey in South Carolina, your parent teacher survey. You pull your community involvement, the communication piece. Here's gaps. Here's what we're going to do with social media to try to fix it. Now, some people don't do social media. I highly recommend social media. If you don't, you're not going to get more than a 3 on this evidence. We want to see more modern technology used to connect with people. The old phone tree kind of thing, that'll get you proficient. But again, if you have something that's old school, last century in this thing, and it's not using modern technology, don't expect to make a 4 on this. And if and I will catch if your short term is if your long term is just an extension of your short term. We're just going to do more of it long. Short term and long term are 2 different things. Short term is how we're going to connect with them, what social media platform, and long term is now that we got them hooked, now that we're communicating with them, what event are we going to run? What event are we going to run? That's academic in nature. Oh, I had one the other day said we're going to have a spaghetti supper. For what purpose? Well, just to get parents in the building. That's the same as a ball game. That won't make that's of no help. They'll make them happy if the food's good. But if it's rubber chicken, they ain't gonna be happy anyway, or bad spaghetti. Yeah. My life is complete enough. I don't have to eat another plate of bad spaghetti in my entire lifetime. It's okay on family math night if you want to feed them, have pizza or something. But the point is not to feed them. The point is to get them there so that you can help their child. And then you just have to identify the resources it's going to take, both people and the money. And then you write the full plan out on what you're trying to do here. And then you do your competencies. Don't overthink it. The only thing you just got to have your survey results. Once you get your survey results, community and parent involvement, and your school leadership results, it's easy after that. I mean, it's really quick. I've got a couple of good examples for you here. I've got a South Carolina example. I've got a short one, a long one. Now, somebody will ask me, one of them is better than the other. Duh. One's a 3 and one's a 4. It's up to you. Again, time management. You got to make decisions. We could all do better if we had more time. You can write a 3 or you can write a 4. It's up to you. But again, I want you making sure you do all your activities, you're collaborating on your case studies. Those things are important. These are important too. But, as we add more and more things, you have to make decisions. That's what administrators have to do. We're forcing you to make some choices. That's intentional, folks. I'm not just being mean to you. I told you it's called gradual release, or if you want to look at it from the negative, intentional abandonment. But I'm trying to get you to change your lens and understand. You can work yourself to death in this job, or you can do this is good. I've satisfied the requirement, and I'm moving on to more important or more things that are also important. And this will also help you when you go to your doctoral program. We'll talk about that in a minute. Kathleen, you've got a question?
Yeah. For the team part of it, because this is kind of.
Don't worry about the team part.
Okay, because I've got some
input
from other people, but I don't really have a full team. It's called leading a team, though. That's what it says in the task.
You can be a team of one.
Perfect.
Cool. One of the army slogans one time. Be a team of one. You don't need a team. You can do it if you want to. You could do like a Zoom with some people or something like that. But you don't need a team. You've already done that. You could do it with your team from this class. Y'all could look at them. You could do that. That's if in a perfect world. In the summertime, I told you when we got to the skip that we would have to modify. Remember that? I told you that the first night.
I guess I don't remember. It's been a while.
Do what now?
I just said I guess I don't remember. We've done a lot since then.
We have, and that's okay. But this is one of those that, if we were in the spring or the fall and school was in session, it would be easy. And I'd still tell you to do it if you wanted to, not if you didn't want to. But this summer, it's not really an option. I get it. You can look at the TWC. You've done that with a team before. You've already accomplished that. You've already figured out how to do that. It's time to move on. I don't think it will have any impact on the quality of what you do, whether you do it or whether you have people sitting there in the room with you going, yeah, that looks good to me. So it's not like doing a data dive. There's a reason why we don't teach 601 in the summertime. You need to form a PLC and you need to run that, but you've already learned how to put a committee or a group together with a PLC. You learned that last semester, not important this semester. I don't want every semester to be the same experience where you just do the same things over and over. I told you we have some different stuff for you this time, and then we'll have some different stuff for you next time. And that's hopefully what keeps you coming back and keeps you interested and keeps you growing and learning. Is that we don't, once we got one thing under our belt, we figure you got it. You're pretty smart. You wouldn't be here, and we'll move on. And y'all have already learned how to form and run a PLC. I don't need you to do that again this summer. You can pull down your data and analyze it and move on. That's why I said you ought to finish this one in a week. This one is very simple, very straightforward. So, other questions that you have for me? That's a great question. There are no interviews or any of that. There's no qualitative in this one. This is simply pulling your data down. This was quantitative only, just looking at your numbers. You do not have to do any interviews. You don't really have to do a team. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You're looking for gaps in communication. Now, one of the things that a lot of folks do is they talk to their school administration about, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, or could we actually pull this kind of thing off? I mean, if it's something, if we sit down and, have we tried this before? But now I'll caution you, and the reason I mention that is that there's no good deed goes unpunished. I can't tell you the number of times students came back to me mad at me, pouting. Principal said, that's a great idea. They wanted me to do this, to become the webmaster or create this social media account or whatever. And I'm like, well, you asked. And so, but that's the only person that I would consult with. But again, know that if you do that, you may get to be assigned to the one that develops this new website or sees that it gets done, or this new WhatsApp group or whatever. I'm a part of 2 WhatsApp groups myself. I think I like it. And what does it cost, $1 a year or some ridiculously low price? I like WhatsApp. That's a really good. And you get the alerts. My wife uses Facebook Messenger. Her group, her professional group uses Messenger. I'm not a big Facebook fan, but I'm on hers. But yeah, she uses Messenger. I use WhatsApp, and for that kind of communication. Now, and I've got another one which is a text group under SMS. Right here. There it is. We've got several on it. So that's what I'm talking about. Create something like that, or recommend that. You got SMS texting. You got WhatsApp, which is my favorite. It's better for larger groups. And then you've got Facebook Messenger. But again, the ordeal of everything that Facebook wants to put you through, and advertisements and all that other stuff. The beauty of WhatsApp is it's for large groups like that, but they don't have that. You pay $1 a year or $2, whatever it is, and you don't have to go through all the rigmarole of Facebook. That's why I prefer WhatsApp over Messenger. I mean, they work equally as well in terms of the actual technology piece. It's just all the accoutrement that goes with Facebook that I'm not. I don't really need to see what you had for dinner last night. It really doesn't interest me. So I'm not a Facebook maven. And why everybody has to take a picture of everything they've ever eaten and put it on a social media platform is beyond me. So that's just editorializing, but that's kind of stuff that that we would talk about. What's the best effective way to communicate with these people? You got every parent's phone number. Just get them to agree to get on the WhatsApp or Messenger or SMS, and they get a text about what's going on in school and a reminder: we're having this event, we're having that event. Come by for this, come by for that. Once you got them hooked, the whole idea is to hook them, communicate with them, but not just but that's not the end. The reason why you hook them is now we get them to come to school. Help us help you help your child. That we want to capitalize on that communication piece to get them involved in their child's education. The best one I ever did, I think I told you this story, was at Northwest Guilford High School. Ralph retired fairly recently, but Ralph was principal there. I had 6 interns there at one time, 6. And I worked that area. And Keisha Sinclair and Diana Birdsey partnered with Novant and did a career day in high school, career fair, college fair, career fair, and partnered with Novant. And at each table, it had a card that said, this is how much this job pays in the medical industry. This is the degree that you've got to have from this, major. And these are the advanced courses that you have to take in high school. Well, that's of no value when seniors walking through, but they set it up and communicated it out and got all the freshmen and their parents to come one night and walk through and see that. Within 2 years, Northwest Guilford High School had the most kids enrolled in advanced courses of any high school in North Carolina within 2 years. They went from middle of the pack to number one, kids taking advanced courses. That's the biggest thing. And then we did one at Parkland and Winston-Salem with Dr. Wendy and Jonathan and Lisa. I had 4 there at one time. We did one at Parkland. Now, the first event we put on for the Hispanic community, we had 4 people, not 400. We had 4. We partnered with a local community organizer, Reverend Jose, in the local Hispanic church, and figured out that we had to do it at a certain time of day on the bus lines when the buses were running those things. Second time we ran it, we had 400. Their test scores got off the bottom and went through the roof. Dr. Lee, Bill Lee, was the principal there. Again, it changed the trajectory of both of those schools, what they were able to do by getting that parent involved. But again, they had that communication piece. And so the important part was, Tisha put together the actual secondary long-term event of that. But Diana did the communication piece. And they did they did a social media piece. First time the school ever had a website and a communication. And they set that up and then got them into the long-term event. Again, we set it up, we ran the event at Parkland first, nobody came. And it was a perfect example of if you're not communicating, if you hadn't figured out the key to communication, then you're not. And so we were able to get into a Hispanic-based app on their phones through Reverend Jose. We killed it then. So you can't do one without the other. The point of those 2 stories is you can have the best event in the world. If nobody knows, they're not showing up. You got to find those gaps in communication and figure out a way to overcome those, and then you can get them to come, and then you can move mountains. I'm telling you. But you can have the best event in the world, but if you all just standing there as a faculty looking at one another, it's not going to do much for your school. So one of my doctorals defended today, and he's in organizational leadership. He works for the police department, and he's partnered with Caramont Hospital over in Gastonia with their police and security forces over there. And that's one of the things we did, basically a skip with them. We did this at a hospital, how to communicate and then have events. And Caramont's over the roof. They're going to spend $46,000 on the next couple of events. We're doing a skip at a hospital. But Reed Rollins, captain, he's the captain over there in their police force. He defended his dissertation today. But we basically just did a skip with them. And it's not even school based. It's a hospital, but it works, folks. If you can communicate and get people in, you can. But the communication piece is the first part. That's the most important part. And so this format will work in a school. It works in a hospital. I mean, it works in. I've used a similar thing with my higher ed doctorals at community colleges. I'm telling you, the communication piece has to come first. If you can figure that part out, then you can do a lot of good things. Okay. Anything else that I can cover on this? All the materials are there. You've got your template. Again, you've got those things for those. And so you should be good on this. I trust you. I know you'll do the right thing. Again, you don't need a team to do this. Y'all are grown folks now. Y'all can do this on your own. And that's another level of learning too. It really is. I hope y'all all have a good holiday. I think that I might even be a year older the next time y'all see me, if that's possible. So y'all have a good holiday week. I'll see you again soon.
I have a quick question for you that's not I'm kind of just looking forward. My principal is changing. My principal's going to a different school and we're getting a new one, and I'm not really sure. I want to eventually talk to her about like the fact that I'm doing the doctoral program and that I'm going to need somebody that can commit to like helping me out, but how much, I mean, in like the next semester, how much I going to need direct interaction with a principal to help me through with the coursework?
In the doctoral program,
Well, for next semester, yeah.
no. You're going to do a standards project next semester, but you're not going to. You're not going to need that much help from your principal. Um, your last evidence is just putting the first five together, making a school improvement plan. We've done all the individual parts, so no help on that one. The cap is just got to go out and again, you go straight back to teacher working conditions survey. You pull the 5 areas at time, resources, facilities, teacher leadership, and school leadership. You pull those 5 areas, do the analysis, write recommendations, and go talk to teachers about it, and you're done. The principal has no role in that one either. The principal's role was in the first couple. We're trying to move you to more independence, where you're not a function of them. That you can operate separate from them. It's not that we don't want them to be involved. It's just, again, that gradual release from where you emerge as your own leader, and that's what next semester about. Whether you're in 605 or 730 starting the doctoral program, next semester is about you emerging as your own leader, finding your own way, your own path. That's what that course is. It's basically the same course. But that's what it's about, learning about yourself, about leadership styles, who you are, doing dispositional assessments of your own leadership skills and styles and behaviors. It's that course, we focused on the academic piece, we focused on the management piece, and now we're going to focus on the last course focuses on the most important piece, you. Because in the end, the real project from this degree program was you. It wasn't about the work itself. It was about developing you. And you're going to get to learn a lot about yourself and as a person, as a leader next semester. And that's intentional. That we want you to focus on you. And see where your gaps are, your blind spots. You'll do Johari's window, the part that you can't see about yourself. We want you to step out and be good. I'll tell you right now, and this sounds boastful, but DPI collects data on all providers. Our folks do the best of any school in the state by far on their evaluations on standards because that they know themselves as leaders. I'm not making this up. The data is clear. I mean, I've got it in a spreadsheet I can show you. But it's because they know that they learned something that first 2 semesters, which I think obviously everybody thinks their course is the most important. But I think what really brings it home is we kind of set you loose in that last semester and let you step out there and find your own way. And that's so important when you get a job. So important that you don't have to be managed every minute of the day, and somebody doesn't have to come in and give you a list of things to do every day, that you know what's important and you can manage your time, and that you don't spend all of your time on one thing and let other things drop. That's kind of that's kind of the squeeze that I'm putting you in this summer. You could sit and write 20 hours a day on evidences, but then you wouldn't do your case studies and you wouldn't get out and interview people, those things. This is just a teaching technique here, but I think 605 and 730 kind of rounds you out, and I think that's why our folks do so well. Is they know who they are and what their weaknesses are, and they can address them. They know what they've got to work on and what they don't, and what their where their competencies lie. So, having a new principal won't cause you any problems whatsoever. Not in 605. It would not be good if it was 601, as you could figure out. But 605, you're fine.
Yeah, and she's an AP that's moving up. This is her first like official principal role
Yeah,
too. So.
and that wouldn't be a lot of help anyway. She's just going to be trying to keep from the ground.
Yeah, and my school has some challenges, so
Mm-hmm.
she's in for a big year.
Time management's going to be her biggest issue. Trying to do all things for all people and fix everything the first week. just before I came on with y'all, I was on the phone with Steve, my partner that just retired from the LS program. He's going to, going to be the superintendent in Gaston starting Friday for another year. He's a retired superintendent. He's going back, and he can already tell you. I mean, we were already talking. He's never going to be able to take a phone call. He understands. It's just going to be. And he's done it for 14 and a half years before he came to Gardner Webb. It's like I did it for a number of years. But what I'm talking about is even though he's done it, it's been such a long time since he did it. I mean, he's been at Gardner Webb for 10 years. It's going to be a learning curve again, trying to get everything done. And you have to make priorities, and you can't do everything for everybody, especially the first day. And so you don't need to be a burden on her. It's not that you don't respect her and don't want to work with her, but she's going to be overloaded. And she's going to have to find that balance. Hopefully she came through a good program that taught her some of that, and she exercised some of that discretion when she was in AP, and didn't try to do everything for everybody then. And, it's literally, folks will give you more than you can do if you will let them. And you can take on more than you can accomplish. And so
I know that in my current job. So
yeah, and you need to be supportive of her and not be a problem, but be a helpmate. There's something I can do for you. I can do this. You don't need to explain it to me. But by the time you got explained, you could have done it yourself. I can do this. I can help you with that. If you just need me, just call on me. That kind of thing. I've had a lot of interns that really launched their careers. They turned these lemons into a new principal first time into lemonade, and it launched them into a job. So it's not a bad thing. If it was first semester, it would be a bad thing. But where you are now, you got this. Not a problem. All right. Call me, email me. Got problems, questions? Let me know. I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good holiday. Thanks.
You too. Thanks. Bye. Good night. Thank you.